So if you're not on the Zoom, we are now being sent to YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook. On our Sunbelt Steel SBSA Steel Guys channel on YouTube, it's now live. On our Sunbelt Steel SBSA Steel Guys channel, which you can hear me there talking. I'm going to mute myself. And then we are refreshing the LinkedIn live page, which we are now live. You can hear me there. Okay, so we're live on both of them. Okay, so we're live there. So now we probably have, in just a couple seconds, we're going to put up the countdown timer. I know you can hear me. I'm not going to mute myself, but we are getting set up. So we'll be starting in about 3 minutes here, the break time with the Steel Guys. Coming to you a day late this week, but a little travel schedule got knocked up there, changed things up. I now have chat active as well. So we do have the chat feature that's picking up the LinkedIn and YouTube channel. And the Zoom's going to come in directly to us. We have to monitor that in our, and Scott, if you're on there looking, and I don't know if you can look at the Q&A or the Q&A and the, I guess I can put that up there too. The Q&A and the, I don't know if the chat works. I guess it probably does. Hosts and panelists, everyone. Let's just say hi, Zoom. We'll be going live here in a minute. We've done a little testing here on our audio and video, and hopefully we've got it down where you can hear us well and all that when we get started here in about 2 minutes. See, Scott Glenn's logging in from Katy, Texas here on our Zoom call. And let's see here. Looks like we got 1 minute and 2 seconds. And we'll be getting the intro going here in about 5 seconds. Start her up here, ready, set. Well, good morning, everyone. If it's morning where you're at, I guess if you're on the East Coast, you're going to be afternoon now. Well, welcome to the Steel Guys January 12th edition. Today, we're going to be talking about the 2023 recap in the metal supply chain and a kind of a little outlook, our perception, and anybody that's on here would just want to talk about the outlook as well. Just kind of to facilitate a discussion here around what we saw last year, a few things we saw. It kind of corresponds a little bit to our innovations in the steel supply chain from 2 weeks ago, where we talked about the different segments and it kind of if we kind of go through the different segments, and some things affected that, and some things, each segment's a little bit different, and they're all interrelated, but they work on that. So let's see, recapping what we got going on here. We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. Welcome, everybody. If you don't mind, if you would put in the chat here where you're logging in from, we'd love to know where you're logging in from. I see Scott Glenn's there at Katy, Texas. Welcome, Scott Glenn. We'll be on with you in just a half second. So today we'll go through a little agenda, put together about 10 newsworthy topics from last year that we kind of looked at, and we'll talk about them. And while we're talking about them, kind of maybe segue into kind of current situations maybe that we see in some of them, and then kind of an outlook, because obviously this is an election year here in the United States, and sometimes that changes and affects the different things that are going on. But so anyway, again, we're monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, we're taking a peek at the Zoom call and the keeping on track of the LinkedIn and YouTube chats. And with that, I guess what I'd like to do is bring in Scott Glenn.
Hello,
Scott.
hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hopefully we don't have an echo.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time trying to get rid of that echo.
That's right. Welcome, everybody. I hope that everybody can hear us okay, and we're glad to be here, and hopefully we can, as Jim said, facilitate a conversation between everybody. We certainly don't have all the answers for everybody, but we'll throw out some topics for discussion out there and see what kind of conversations we can generate.
Master of all trades, jack of all trades, master of none.
That's kind of my.
We're here to facilitate a discussion.
Right.
We have experience, and we've got a lot of years of wisdom that are out there, but it doesn't make us perfect people. But it does give us some idea, concept of what we have seen in the past, and looking in the future is always a crystal ball. If anybody could figure that out, I suppose they would be a wealthy person.
Well, but that's one of the reasons why we like to do this, is that we certainly can't predict the future, but the more knowledge that you have about the current happenings that are going on in the industry, it gives you a little bit of a guideline or a little assistance in helping everybody make decisions.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, let's kind of dive in here and take a look at kind of, again, the different segments. We've got a few topics, and I'll kind of just read the headlines here that were kind of the things that we're going to be going over here today. So if something interests you, throw it down in the chat and we can zero in on it. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of put our 2 cents in as we read these. After we read them, kind of go back through them and take a peek at that. But as I don't know, Scott, let's just maybe take a second here. I know I was sitting here trying to think the recap of 2023, where we were at, and I guess this is 2024. And looking back at 2023, I didn't even realize, but one of the events in our life here, that started off last year, was our brother, our third steel guy there, passed. So I'd like to just take maybe a couple seconds here, just a moment of silence and remembrance of him, and say, remembrance, start the year off differently this year. Well, anyway, thanks.
Yeah. That's hard to imagine that that's almost been a year. It's January 28th was his passing. So very unfortunate situation, but that is.
I threw our steel guys off a little bit because we had been going pretty strong with the, I guess we were more of a monthly situation back then instead of the break time, where we've gone to the weekly format here recently. But again, it took us a couple of months after that to get back into the swing of things. And we started with the month, and then we kind of segued into, I think it was close to mid last year. I think John Armstrong was August of last year. So we did a couple before that, I think. And then his event in August, and then a few of them after that. And we started our weekly. It was somewhere in the November, a little before Thanksgiving.
Somewhere around there, the end of last year. Yeah.
Yeah, that concept, a little shorter. We're trying to make it a little more concise instead of staying on for an hour or whatever, trying to pick a topic and have a discussion around a certain topic. And what was it, 2 weeks ago, we did innovations in the metal supply chain. Last week, we did Incoterms, which was a follow-up to an Incoterm from a month or so ago that we had done. We had a little technical snafu. and we try to put
that
it.
happens in today's world.
Yeah, yeah. I guess they just plugging in all the data and doing all that stuff. You just whoops, if you don't get it right, you can really mess up. Even if you practice all you practice.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, let's take a look here. Some of the things that just major topics we got going on here. Last year there was the global chip shortage, which created some disruptions in the supply chain of metals. There was a lot of green, continuing green innovations for sustainable sourcing in the metal supply chain. And it's kind of, I think you've seen the DEI and sustainability and a few things like that kind of become an influence in the metals supply chain in the last couple of years, but specifically last year we're looking at. A lot of reshoring of manufacturing in the United States has brought things back in the United States and caused some changes in supply chain and some certain metals and things like that, depending on what markets, reshored.
Certainly would like to see a lot more of that, but some of
Continuing.
it's just not feasible. But
Yeah, labor rates and environmental concerns and stuff like that. It happens somewhere in the world, the environmental. So I don't know.
mm-hmm.
Again, clean water. We all have to have clean water. Yes, we want clean water in the United States.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, healthcare. Yeah. One of the things I think when we did a little other research was you kept seeing AI and digital transformation. We've been seeing digital stuff before Y2K in the year 2000. We saw, the PCs come into play in the early 90s or late 80s and the early 90s started seeing the PCs enter the marketplace. But today we talk about digitizing everything. So we'll talk a little more about that here in a little while. Another factor last year, and again, it's probably not just last year, but I think we've seen this just about every year, is trade disputes and how that alters the metal supply chain.
Yep. Yeah, I know towards the end of last year that, no, just recently, actually, the Biden administration extended the EU tariffs. So, yeah, not that that's a trade dispute, but
they extended the exemptions to the tariffs.
The exemptions, excuse me. Yes. Thanks for the clarification there. Yes.
Yeah. And then, there was also some labor shortages, and there's not just shortages, but we saw some strikes and things like that. But we'll talk about the labor shortages that affected the supply chain of metals. One thing that keeps going over and over and over again, the blockchain, what is that and how that affects the metal supply chain, how that affects computerizing, digitizing. I think that's one and the same, that digitization in the blockchain. Somewhat. We're not experts in that side of
I've
things.
got a lot to learn about that. I've heard the term more and more, and I think we'll all continue to hear that term more and more, but there is, I'd like to gain some more knowledge on that.
Which brings up point number 9, cybersecurity, the threats and highlight and supply chain vulnerabilities. What vulnerabilities exist as you digitize, as you use blockchain? There's the more and more you have to be secure in your cyber security.
Sure.
And we're not experts in that either, but let's talk about it and see if we can kind of come up with something. If anybody has any questions, and try to put people in the right direction. Collaboration and partnerships drive innovation in the metal supply chain. I don't really know. We can kind of look at that as we get back into that, but going back up to the top here, let's get started. If anybody has any questions, again, we're monitoring. I haven't seen anything pop in yet, but the chip shortage, again, last year for me, that was why that affected that. Again, I was at auto manufacturers, since they couldn't make cars, you weren't using as much steel in the automotive side of things. So the production went down in that, and that affected. But I think I read an article, maybe you can clarify a little bit, Scott, on the CRU pricing structure on the some comments that people made about supply chain, especially I think going into the Nippon U.S. Steel merger and / domestic production and the consolidation of the industry. I've seen a lot of the pricing structure for some of that steel has maybe the base price hasn't moved. Right? And that might be more on the stainless side of things, since you don't have a lot of stainless producers in the United States. The base prices, with nickel and the nickel changes, that's in the surcharges on all the elements, that's a different story. But I'm not sure base prices have changed much in the stainless side of things in the last couple of years.
Not base prices, but obviously the nickel fluctuation has certainly had quite an effect on pricing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
So I
it's
don't know, how does that affect in the carbon side of things? You seen that a little bit again. You got the alloy side of the carbon side,
well, yeah, the carbon side of things. I mean, I have two separate industries, obviously, but the carbon side of things, prices are going back up. I mean, and I don't know really what's driving that 100%, but the purchase of U.S. steel by Nippon Steel, I don't think that has any direct correlation to it. But the world market as it sits has an effect on that.
and we're
Yeah.
gonna, I don't know, again, that's part of that 2024 outlook, segueing in some of this stuff, and we've got a lot of separate topics there. But I guess maybe we can just sum it up and just talk for a few minutes, because we've been going here for a little while already. Sum it up and kind of say, what was 2023 like? Saw a lot of swings, a lot of labor, a lot of the automotive, a lot of we didn't see the 2 years ago. We saw those port problems and the COVID 3 years ago. So you've seen disruptions just about every year.
Yeah, and on top of that too, you had the increase in interest rates, significant increases in interest rates last year with inflation, trying to trim that down. But that certainly had an effect on pricing all the way down the line.
Speaking, and
Energy.
I don't know, somebody out there that's in the maybe more towards the mill side of this, and even the extraction side, the ore. When you start seeing ore prices go up, why you start seeing mill prices, the carbon stainless, the flat rolled, or whatever the base core elements, coming, and the increase in the price in there. Why is that? And I stop and think sometimes, say, well, it's easy for me to understand McDonald's. If the guy down there was making $7 an hour last year and now he's making $20 an hour this year, that's a heck of an increase. And I don't know what percentage of the burger is labor, but my burger has gone. In fact, we tell the story. We were out at Denny's. We went and traveled, and we were in California. And we have a standard mill that we get, which was a build your own slam. And we used to pay $7.99 to $9.99, I think, was it?
Something like that. Throw in a cup of coffee for $2 or whatever it was.
Right. And if we could get away for, you get away for $25 for two people. And so
max, that tip included. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What they set a bill down in front of us, so we ordered the same things. We didn't even question it. We just ordered it because we didn't even look at the menu or anything. Then we got the bill and it was like $45.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we went outside, and on top of this thing, they're advertising, next door, the McDonald's place was offering $20 an hour for plus benefits and whatever things for well,
certainly a whole nother topic for discussion. But right, yeah, everything's inflation and cost of living and all that kind of stuff.
My point, none of the guys that are mining are actually minimum wage laborers. Probably the mill guys aren't minimum wage laborers either. However, if they were making $25 or $20 before, and now the McDonald's guys are making $20, they're going to have. That's why I guess when the auto workers, they wanted instead of a 40-hour work week, they wanted a 34-hour work week or whatever, and they wanted to be paid for 40. Plus, they wanted a 20% or whatever increase on their wages or something like that. I forget what the numbers were, but seemed like, well, that's. I mean, who's going to stop them? I mean, if my burger is going to be, instead of being $5, is going to be $8 or $9 or $10.
Yep. That's
my point. How does that translate from a burger? We're talking about burgers, but again, you apply that same concept through the supply chain of metals in every one of those levels that from a mill, from the ore extraction to the mill, to the service centers, to the fabricators. And if every one of those has that bump, the end user down there, when they finally get their steel, how much is that? They're going to be same thing that happened to us in the menu of the build your own. It's going to be the same thing. They're going to see this.
Well, yeah, and ultimately, it's not just going to be the end user; it's going to be the consumer. I mean, that's going to is all, which we're seeing that with the build your own type situation. It just goes all the way down to where we're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I did some traveling. Like I said, why we're doing this today instead of yesterday is I was traveling and I went from one state to another, and I'd buy, I don't know how even state to state it's changing. I mean, I was just buying oatmeal, which is a commodity, and the same size oatmeal container here, I pay $3.50 for a container of it, generic brand oatmeal, old fashioned oatmeal, and I went down to Florida and it was $5.68 for the same container of oatmeal. Why?
Was that just at a standard grocery store, or was it a convenience store, or
One of the big public,
the big public grocery stores? Yeah.
Apples to apples, but again, why is the difference in state to state that much different? I don't think
because they can. I don't know.
It's just taxes, and you can, and that's actually a low tax state too. So I don't know. I mean, both of them, Texas and Florida, those are the two states that promote, low taxes and things like that. But it seems like it's getting its way into everything. But again, relating back to the steel business, that's the same. We're seeing the same thing. The end user and finally the consumer of the products, you're going to see that increase.
Right.
It just takes time to run through there. And that's the next thing on the topic here is the changes. And we see that last year to this year too, is the green initiative, sustainability, DEI, those things, those words that keep creeping in everything. And none of them are free and none of them are cost saving measures. They're all increase of costs.
Carbon neutral production and stuff like that. There's a lot of conversations about that and the value of that. I'm all for a cleaner environment, that's for sure, but at what cost? And that's that. I guess that's the conversation that everybody's having. Not everybody.
We're having it right now, though.
Here we are. Yeah.
The steel guys are here talking about it.
Somebody else join in there. Help us out.
Come on.
What's your thought? What's your thoughts out there?
Yeah, another thing we have here on the steel guys, I just had a thought as to how we, if somebody's on here, I can open it up. I think, put them on if they would like to ask a question, just raise your hand and I'll unmute your microphone, I suppose, and you can ask the question. I guess we'd love to try that, get that out there.
Sure. Yeah.
Try that mode.
Or even if you have any input on the conversation that we're having too. I mean,
you type
we're not trying to be controversial in any way, but I mean, any valid input is wonderful.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can either ask the question or type it, one of the two.
Yeah, for sure.
Converse, having a conversation on here, adding you to the voice is always good.
Sure.
The next item here is the trade disputes. I don't know, trade disputes, like you stated a little while ago, the EU is exempt from the tariffs. And one of the things that's happened this week in a couple of posts I did here on LinkedIn was the Indian market, and we have a couple of Indian products that we sell as well. And there's a couple of things that are affecting not just trade, but we're starting to see the Suez Canal being blocked by pirates that are starting, the shipping containers are now having to go around the Cape Horn of Africa or whatever. And it's adding a couple weeks travel time, plus it's adding
plus a couple $1,000 per container. I mean, it's increasing the cost of transportation on the ocean freight as well. Yeah.
Which there's a trade dispute, and that was one of the posts I made. It was not the ocean shipping, but more of, it was an interesting article on how China is dumping steel into India. And I think we talked to one of our suppliers about that it's the same thing. India put a tariff on finished goods. So what China ended up doing was shipping the raw materials, the slabs and things like that over at a lower cost. So, and it's always interesting to me that the steel, we have tariffs on from China, and now India has tariffs on from China, but somehow, you know, uh, China can ship steel to India, and India can ship steel to us.
I just read a headline the other day. I didn't read all the details of it, but there was a country, and I can't remember who it was, but put an 80% tariff on Vietnamese steel. That's a pretty significant tariff.
Never can. I always look at that. The currencies. I know there's the difference in currencies. I mean, you got shipping on top of that. How?
I
Uh,
should say up to an 80%, so it's
okay,
not
right.
across the board. So
And in the different product
yeah,
lines, things
right.
like that. Yes, it's something else. But anyway, that's the trade dispute part of it. Outlook for 2024. I don't know. I don't know what people are going to do. I haven't seen any pullback on the 25% tariffs into the United States. Have you? I don't see
No, I
the
don't think
exemptions
so.
on a couple of EU and things like that, but I don't see
Yeah,
the
well, I mean, the United States is still probably one of the strongest economies in the world. So we have other economies are pretty weak. So they're still trying to balance out their economies.
right. So we have to just take a look at that and see what's going on. Now, the one of the other topics here we had was the labor. Again, we saw labor, and we've already kind of talked about that. The auto workers, the labor problems they had there. I don't know of any more in the steel. The steel workers haven't done much, and have they? They didn't.
I haven't heard any contracts in the steel workers. I know the auto workers, resolve their issues, but I haven't heard anything in terms of the steel workers.
But the employment rates, the unemployment is very low, so the employment rates are very high in the United States. Therefore, a lot of the skilled workers, that's one of the things, the labor shortages. There appears to be, and again, that caused the inflation part of it as well. When you start to see the labor shortages, you start to see, but it's the skilled workers, not just in the steel workers area, but you start the service centers and having people run the machinery at the service centers, and then the end users, the all the laser tables and the CNC equipment, and um, that need to be run by a little bit skilled labor that I don't know. And apparently, we're a little short on labor in the United States, so it causes problems in production and supply chain, especially when you're reshoring material, like we talked about a little while ago. You start to need more skilled labor.
Right. Another thing too, and we've been watching this for a long time, is robotics. The introduction to robotics, certainly in the production lines and automotives and stuff like that. Everybody was really, really afraid of the fact that we're going to put robotics into the production lines and nobody's going to be able to get a job. And obviously, it did make a transition, and I think there's going to be a lot more of that continuing to happen when you start to interject AI into the world at the rate that we're going right now. That's going to be a big thing in the future. I don't know what it looks like. I really don't, but it's going to change things. And with robotics and AI, that's going to make things more efficient, and it's the need for people to do things it's going to diminish.
Where did I
So
see there's a McDonald's, I believe it was, that started they have a restaurant now that actually is 100% labor free, 100% robotics. They take
really,
your order, it takes your order, it produces the food, gets it out of the fridge, puts it in the fryers and whatever, the griddles, and
oh wow.
packages it and collects your money and gives you your food. No
Wow.
employees.
Wow, you gotta have somebody in there making sure that the computer doesn't shut
Maintenance.
down, but
I guess
yeah.
maintenance on that, but that's no
But as
employees.
far as the actual production
Yeah.
goes,
Yeah. I think
interesting.
it was this week it opened up, I think, or a couple in the last couple of weeks, change. Maybe it was January 1st. I don't know.
Well, it's those kind of things. We'll probably start to see lots more of that kind of stuff, you know?
Which we've talked about in the innovations and the
Yeah.
autonomous vehicles and
Yeah, I
autonomous.
mean, even in the extraction process, there's automation going on in that area as well, which we're not real in tune with that, but we read about it and hear about it. So,
Yeah.
there are going to be changes that go on all the way from the top down to the fabrication,
Your GPS technology and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff out there. Well, that kind of covers the topic. I forget, we have picked a couple topics coming up here. I forget what the next one was. We'll definitely send out a note to everybody.
Yeah.
I'll probably try to get that put together either today or sometime this weekend and get a notice out and everybody join us next. It'll be Thursday next week.
Yes.
Move it back to the Thursday time at 11 o'clock Central. And I'll get you the topic out there. We do have a couple of mill presentations coming up. We've opted whether we're going to put it into the break time here time slot or whether we're going to do it on a special time. I'm kind of leaning towards throwing it into a break time slot.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
it would be a good fit. I mean, and again, anybody out there that has any suggestions or comments on that, let us know. We'd like to hear your input on that. But yeah, I think it probably would be a good fit into this time slot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just throw it in. Again, we're gonna one stainless steel angle out of India, container loads of stainless steel angle, and the other one's nails, collated in bulk nails, stainless steel.
Right. And also the manufacturer that we're working with on the stainless steel angle does produce round bar,
right bar.
and squares and rectangular bars, hexes and stuff like that. Some of them have some anti-dumping duties, but they do
They're going
have
to
some.
be hopefully overcome here recently. You
Yeah,
got
we're hoping to
exceptions and up twos and
Yeah.
therefores and why
Well,
for.
keep an eye out for that. We'd love to have you join us and ask any questions on that as well.
Yes,
Yes.
probably a little bit about the equipment and things like that, and how it's made, and how they're made, and what kind of equipment it takes to do that. And nails were a little different for us, so that's something we spent some time with that, and that's an interesting process there.
We like to learn about that stuff too as we do these interviews with the manufacturers. It's educational for us as well.
Yeah. So what else you got? Anything else for the 2023 the outlook recap and 2024 outlook?
There's a lot of things out there that you got to wait and see what happens. Certainly AI is with a lot that's going on. The economy, as you stated earlier, it is an election year, so are they going to drop interest rates, and what effect will that have on the market? I don't think it's going to create any new demand, but who knows? I don't know. I really don't. But new innovations in the distribution market, electric vehicles, and a lot of that kind of stuff. It's all stuff that we've all heard about. And another one to keep an eye out for is what's going on with the digital currencies, and is that going to become a part of our lives? I kind of suspect that it will, but I don't know how that's going to look either.
Well, we're in the second decade of development for Bitcoin. I mean, it's hard to believe it's been around for
Over
over 10
15
years.
years, yeah.
15,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the acceptance of that, whether it's going to be accepted or not, and all that stuff. So
Yeah, and and it's going to be a key. I know that the government wants to take and get their hands in on it, and if that happens, then it's going to be a whole different game. But
that's the beauty of Bitcoin. Hopefully, it's not centralized.
yes, indeed, that's another subject that might be a good one for our podcast. Who knows?
Well, while we're on that topic, one of the things that you and I have talked about here is a thing called community. This metals community. There's various organizations that are developed for each segment of the community, but I don't think there's anything in the metal supply chain as a whole. You got mill stuff, you got service center stuff, you've got PVF stuff. Again, so what we've talked about doing is we're going to develop a community where you can go and all kind of try to coordinate it all in one place, so we can dialogue, do these kind of things inside of that, and also amongst ourselves, and also have maybe some subtopics like Bitcoin, like health and fitness, kind of, where we're like-minded people that have needs and wants and desires that we can help each other with.
Yeah,
And
that's one thing that it's always frustrating to me, and perhaps other people out there share the same frustration from time to time. But you wanna get some answers on a specific topic, whatever it is, electronics or whatever, and you have to go to 4 different places to get an answer or to find out the information. And that's our objective, is to hopefully we won't have all the answers for everybody, but at least to have one community, as you expressed, Jim, to where we can all get together and, hey, if I don't have the answer, somebody in our community will be able to point you in the right direction.
yeah,
To
we're
have,
hopefully like-minded and we have the same, values and objectives and a lot of the same problems because we are in the same business. So, it's a lot easier to find from somebody who's experienced something before.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that. We're developing that right now, and if that's something you like, let us know.
Well, keep an eye out for it because we're gonna bring it to you and we're all
Yeah,
gonna like it together.
well, for sure. Yeah.
All right, with that, I guess say goodbye until next week.
All right. Well, we're
Break
just
time with the
gonna
Steel Guys, January 12th, over and out.
give us the closeout, and we're out of here. All
Yeah.
right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. All right. See you guys later. Thanks.
All
Bye.
right. See you next week.